So in today's lecture I am going to continue on optoelectronic materials. In the last lecture we saw about the gene in organic molecules. The organic molecules have special potential to find applications in organic LEDs, and this is what we have seen in the last class, and I am going to continue giving some examples of how these organic molecules can be used to fine tune organic LEDs, and also how this can be used to modulate the display device properties. So in the next few slides I just want to recap on whatever I have told in the first lecture, just to keep in perspective what we are discussing. As I told you, this is a simple demonstration of a diode where holes come from here, and electrons come from the cathode, and when they combine together they form exciton pair and they release a photon, and that photon, when it is in the middle layer, which is a emissive layer, then the photon can excite the organic molecule. As a result we can get the desired light. And also in the last class, in the last lecture, I touched on the basics of organic LED, where I told that this is a transparent anode which is called indium tin oxide, which is a transparent electrode, and then you have a buffer layer to help grow a hole transport layer, and this is the emissive layer, and this is the electron transport layer. Now hole transport layer and electron transport layers can be polymeric in type, or they can also be small organic molecules, but we are actually talking about the organic molecules here, which are called popularly as emissive layers. So at the recombination zone, which is your which is the emissive layer, if you can bring the number of holes and number of electrons together to recombine at this interface, then you get the desired light which is due to the emissive layer. So this is a basic principle of the organic LED. There are different issues that we can understand. In the last lecture I told you how to get white light emission, and also I told you how these interfaces are important. Because of these interfaces I also showed you another example of how X-Eplex formation can lead to broad emission, that is white light. I showed you an example which we will further see today. So what is important here is how these holes can easily come to the emissive layer, and how the electrons can come to the emissive layer, and thereby they form the excitonic pair which can release a photon here. So the number of holes that you generate, the speed with which the holes travel, the number of electrons you generate, and the speed with which you moderate electrons, all are important in order to harvest the desired light at the emissive layer, which forms the fundamental principle for organic light emitting diode. I also told you about the mechanism, what exactly happens to electroluminescent process, because you have a hole and electron combining to form a singlet exciton. It can also form triplet exciton, but singlet excitons are the ones which ultimately are going to give the external emission, which we see in terms of light output in the OLED device. Therefore we are more concerned about this protocol, how we can harvest the light from a singlet exciton. And also I told you in the last class there are two basic organic class of compounds, namely molecular materials which are based on ALQ3, or polymers which hold this display technology. By and large it has been observed that these molecular materials are more rugged, and it can withstand the thermal issues. Therefore, from thermal stability point of view, small molecules have been used till now for commercial OLED devices, whereas polymers are slightly degradable. They are sensitive to both light and air and other issues. Nevertheless, there is a great potential with polymer because you can go for large area display materials. So, much of work is actually going into polymeric LED, which call it as POLED, polymer LED. So, we will come to this issue later, but we saw in the last class that there are two class of compounds, and in the last lecture we saw two case studies of a organic molecule and a metal organic complex. They show white light emission, and I also discussed with you about why this white light emission is coming. In the case of organic molecule, I showed you that it is due to conformation of the molecule. If it is in cis form, then it shows, and I also showed from metal organic complex, that is zinc BZT complex, I showed how exaplex mediated white light emission can come. In today's lecture, I am going to present to you three case studies, again showing the potential of what all is buried inside a organic molecule, which can show fundamental properties, and it is very easy for us to moderate the light emission in OLED devices if we understand the solid state properties of these organic molecules, because the organic molecules in solution gives an entire different picture when you consider against the solid state properties. So, once we study the PL emission in solid state, we can get to understand what sort of device that we can anticipate from this group of molecules. First, I am going to talk to you about selectivity of PL emission with the different chromophoric groups in the organic molecule. So, this is one example, and as a passing thought, I am also going to give a brief example on hydrogen bonding on the PL emission in Benz heterosols, how hydrogen bonding can play in tuning the PL properties, and on tuning the color, PL efficiency, mobility, how we can use metal organic complexes to vary the PL emission. So, these three will be the basis for today's lecture. As I told you in the last class, if I have the conformation dependent white light emission, either if it is a trans DBE or cis DBE molecule, how we can tune the white light emission. And in the last lecture, I also showed to you about zinc Benz thiazole, how when you make a device out of it, how the interface is actually helping in white light emission. Now, in today's class, I am going to talk to you about specificity and selectivity on the photoluminescent properties of pi conjugated Benz heterosol molecules. Why we are laying more emphasis on Benz heterosols? Because this is a class of compound which we all see in everyday life. If you remember, this is nothing but the cartoon of firefly, which we all have seen, and especially during winter days or in dark environment, you will see this firefly glowing, and it gives light and then it puts off, it gives light and puts off. This is nothing but a classic example of chemiluminescence. When there is chemiluminescence, there is a oxidation reduction process which is going on, which actually is responsible for this light emission, and this is a enzymatic catalyzed enzyme catalyzed reaction. So, therefore, the enzyme is called luciferase, because it helps in helping the molecule to glow. So, what is the molecule that is responsible? It is actually called luminol or luciferase molecule, because in this molecule the functional groups or the chromophoric groups that are responsible for strong emission comes from this Benz thiazole moiety. So this is important. In fact, it is very difficult to isolate this molecule. Therefore, one can actually try to prepare several of this benzyl based molecules to see and to understand what is exactly responsible for the fine tuning of colors. So with this in perspective, we have actually chosen a range of Benz heterosol molecules and try to understand what is the role of these functional groups and the chromophoric groups that are present in the molecules, which will help in fine tuning the light emission. So to this end, I am going to pick out some molecules and then try to show you by playing around with the different combinations how we can fine tune the color. For example, this is an example of two Benz heterosol molecules. This can be nitrogen and sulfur, or nitrogen oxygen, or nitrogen nitrogen. So you can call this as a Benz heterosol in general, or Benz thiazole if it is sulfur, Benz oxazole if it is oxygen, Benz imidazole if it is nitrogen. Now when you have two of this, these are planar molecules, and you can try to have a extended pi conjugation by introducing a linker molecule such as ethylene, or you can have a linker molecule such as phenyl group. So either ethylene or phenyl group can be used to provide a extended pi conjugation. So in this case, how does the electron density really moderate, and how we can try to control the PL emission? It is in such pi conjugated systems. Another way of looking at it, keep both the Benz thiazole moieties away from each other, not in closer proximity. Therefore you can have a linker like this and substitute the Benz thiazole in 1,4 position. So electron pathway will be in this direction. So if it is either this way or this way or this way, how does the electron delocalization in this molecules which is going to affect the PL emission is what to be studied. Now as a general protocol, synthesis of this is very important, and if you are really interested to know how we make this sort of molecules, it is very easy. We can try to make malic acid, or we can try to take carboxylic acid with the carboxyl groups in adjacent position, or you can actually have the carboxylic group in the para position. Now A, or you can either add this with A or with A and B, or with A. Now in this case, if it is A, for example, you can actually generate 3 series of compounds based on X. X can be either sulfur or oxygen or nitrogen. Therefore you can call this either as thiazole or oxazole or imidazole. Similarly, we can actually try to add here, we can try to put either one thiazole and one oxazole, or one thiazole and one imidazole. Therefore you can get a mixed ligand complexes with benzene as phenyl moiety as your linker, or we can actually go for other combinations. Therefore we are going to generate say 4 sets of molecules, and we will try to see generally what is the nature of the PL emission to understand how these chromophoric groups are going to alter the issue. For example, let us take the case of the absorption. This is the absorption data of 1A molecule, and this is the emission spectra of the 1 series. Now if you see here, you can very well understand that if it is a thiazole based molecule, in thiazole you see the bandage is shifted by over 70 nanometers. It is more towards the visible region in case of thiazole species, and imidazole is blue shifted here. You can see that imidazole is having a bandage at 400 nanometer, Now if you go for oxazole, interestingly oxazole has a sharp band edge somewhere around 400, but then you can see that it is actually tailing and extending up to 550. So oxazoles seemingly have a extended optical band edge compared to thiazole and imidazole, but distinctly you can see there is a large shift between the thiazole and oxazole when compared to thiazole compounds. So what is this implication on the emission data? If you look at the emission, you can very clearly see that this 1A molecule has a fine structure, emission structure which is more resolved, and you see several satellite features coming along with a peak maxima which is coming at 550. Okay. Now compared to that, if you look at 1B molecule, which is nothing but your imidazole, imidazole gives a broad emission peak, and 1C compound, which is oxazole, is clearly redshifted. So we can see from here one which is absorbing at the visible region, or which has a bandage more towards visible, is actually showing a featured emission which in which if you actually look at the full width at half maxima, the full width of half maxima is around 165. So 165 nanometer, which means this is more like a white light emitting molecule. Whereas if you look at the imidazole, although it is showing a 1 peak, the full width half maxima is considerably less, and oxazole component shows a very narrow emission, and it is more preferentially in the red region. So we can clearly understand that the thiazole moieties seemingly have a widespread in the emission feature, and it is also showing fine structures in terms of emission. Now we will look at another group of compound, the 2 series, where you are actually, instead of having a alkene linker, you are going to have a phenyl linker. If you have a phenyl linker, then the situation now remains the same as far as oxazole is concerned. You see here oxazole, after a sharp bandage here around 350 nanometers, you see that there is a tailing, and this extends up to the entire visible region. Oxazole seemingly is having a band gap which is much lower. As a result, you can again see in the emission feature that the 2C molecule, which is nothing but your oxazole derivative, again showing a red emission compared to the thiazole and imidazole case. When you look at the bandage of imidazole, when you have pi electron, you can clearly see that the imidazole is extending pi bandage up to 450 or so, while the thiazole is actually showing a blue shifted emission, which is reverse of the 1 series compound. Nevertheless, you can see here the emission spectra, of 2A molecule again shows a full width at half maxima which is 153 nanometer, which means even the 2A molecule, that is thiazole molecule, shows a white light emission, full width at half maxima which is greater than 150 nanometer. So what is peculiar in both the cases, 1 series and 2 series, thiazoles are showing a featured emission, and it is also showing a near white light emission. Whereas if you look at oxazole, whether it is with the phenyl linker or with the alkene linker, you would see that it is showing a preferred red emission. Imidazole on the other hand always shows a green emission. You can see here imidazole always shows a green emission. So this seems to be characteristic of all the Benz heterosols. Now if you go to 3 series where you are going to actually play around with your X, in other words this is a mixed Benz heterosols, you would see the same feature coming for 3C molecule, whereas where 3C is involving a oxazole and a imidazole ring. You can see that the bandage is extending up to 500 nanometer, whereas 3A and 3B molecules are predominantly those which have thiazole and which shows a strong blue shifted emission. Now if you look at the 3C molecule, again wherever oxazole is involved, you see these are red shifted, therefore it is showing a orange color, whereas if you have the 3B molecule which involves imidazole, again you see a green emission, and in the case of sulfur and oxygen combination, oxazole and thiazole, you see near UV emission coming, somewhere around 410 nanometers or so. So what is peculiar in this case is when oxazole is present, oxazole predominantly contributes to red shifted emission, whereas sulfur shows more preference to blue, and imidazoles usually show preference to green color. And the same is true for the 4 series also. If you are going to keep the Benz heterosol rings away from each other, not in closer proximity, then you can see that there is no tailing of this bandage and there is no tailing here, and you can also see that these have sharp bandages below 400 nanometer, and you can also see that the emission spectra are more concerted towards blue region. So this is quite true of both the thiazole as well as imidazole moieties. If you look at the absorption spectra, you can actually do a density functional calculation, DFT calculation, and if you try to generate the UV visible spectra to see whether this is matching with the experimental data, one would find that there is a excellent agreement of the theoretical prediction of this UV visible spectra with the experimental value. This is the experimental curve, and what you see here is a one line spectra, and here you see a two line spectra exactly resembling that of the experimental data. Why we do not see all these featured emissions? Because we are in when we are calculating the UV visible spectra, you are actually considering only one molecule, whereas in the experiments you actually consider hundreds of molecules together. So when you have hundreds of molecules in solid state, when they are packed together, then you would see a featured emission, whereas when you do a calculation for a single molecule, you see the most predominant emission which is mentioned. So we can say that the theoretical analysis goes well with the experimental data. Therefore whatever structure that we are predicting due to optimization of this geometry is nearly the same as that of what we observe in the experiments. And these are some of the energies and the oscillatory strength of these molecules which are calculated. Specifically we have studied 1A and 2A compounds because we would like to see whether we can make some correlation and try to understand why 1A and 2A molecules among the series of compounds that we are studying are standing out and why they have specifically white light emitting properties. That is the whole notion, and these are some of the data that one can arrive at by doing the calculations. Now just to give a visual picture of what these calculations mean, if you look at the frontier molecular orbitals and if you use this B3LYP program which with this subset, if you have this basis set, then this is the sort of charge resonance picture that evolves when you consider 1A molecule. Remember, 1A molecule is nothing but 2 Benz thiazole groups coupled by ethylene linker, and 2A molecule is nothing but 2 Benz thiazole groups coupled by a phenyl linker. So, this is what we mean, and if you look at the frontier molecular orbitals, you can see in the case of HOMO, that is highest occupied molecular orbital, the charge resonance is spread around the ring, and this also involves the alkene moiety, ethylene moiety. And if you look at the lowest unoccupied molecular orbital, again you see in the excited state the charge resonance is spread along the ring, and even so in the case of LUMO. And if you look at one of the higher excited states, LUMO plus 2, you would see the charge resonance is now confined more to the Benz thiazole rings, and also you would see the charge resonance is actually mediating across the sulfur bonds or sulfur atoms. Why? Because sulfur atoms are much bigger and they carry lone pair of electrons. Therefore, the charge resonance is not only through the bond but also through the space. So, you have a through space resonance in the case of sulfur atoms, which is peculiarly absent in the case of imidazole or oxazole. You would not see the same picture if you look at oxazole or imidazole compounds. Now, this is not only true in the case where you have sulfur sulfur in adjacent positions, in cis positions with a ethylene linker. Suppose you try to push it away by introducing a phenyl linker, then even in terms of phenyl linker, you would see here the charge resonance is through the bond across the linker molecule, and it is the same as in the case of 1A compound. And when you come here to LUMO plus 2, again you see that in this case the charge is confined more to the Benz thiazole rings, and also you would see that the charge resonance is across the sulfur atoms. Therefore, the bigger the atom and more the charge density, in other words, because of the availability of the lone pair of electrons, now you have the charge resonance is spread through the space. So, when you have a through space and through bond resonance, then you would see a very different emission phenomena happening, because there is more of charge delocalization. As a result, you would have a broad emission coming into picture. So, the broad emission that we talk about, broad emission is mainly due to the through space and through bond resonance that is typical of only sulfur compounds compared to imidazole and oxazole. Now, if you take 3A compound, as I told you, 3A compound is not having thiazole ring. In one case it is actually imidazole, and in one case it is actually thiazole ring. If you have such a combination, you would see that there is through bond resonance here and also here, but this resonance is actually delocalized, it is localized and it is not spread throughout the ring. And same is the case for 4A molecule also. You can see that charge resonance is across the ring, and it is across the ring here, and there is no through space resonance. Therefore, through space resonance is absent in the case of 3A and 4A molecule, and as a result we can sort of make a general conclusion that the featured emission for thiazoles is mainly because of a extended charge resonance which is spread throughout the ring, which brings down the HOMO-LUMO gap, and because the HOMO-LUMO gap is smaller, the emission is now involving the blue, green and red region. As a result, your full width at half maxima is always above 150 nanometers. So, these sulfur based molecules or thiazole based molecules can act as potential ligands for for extended charge localization. As a result, they are good candidates for white light emission compared to imidazole and oxazole compounds. We can get some more clues when you look at the 1A and the 2A compound. What is different here is only the linker, that is the ethylene linker or the phenyl linker. You would see the time decay curves. If you look at the time decay curves and you fit it to a double exponential decay model, then you would see both has a same component, that is 0.7 nanosecond time decay, which mainly comes from the thiazole molecules, which we can conclude because both have a common tau 1 value, and the tau 2 seems to be coming from the linker. In this case it is 1.42 seconds, it is comparatively faster for aromatic linker compared to ethylene linker. So, we can have a guess as to what is the molecule or what is the functional group or the chromophoric group that is responsible for this time decay. The fast decay component seems to be coming from the benzthiazole as compared to the linker groups, and we can also extend this case now to make devices. For example, we have made two devices using 1A compound and 2A compound, because of all the compounds I have told you that only these two compounds seemingly give white light emission. As a result, we can try to make emissive layer either depositing exclusive 2A compound layer, or we can mix it with PFO as a matrix if you are unable to effectively deposit this in a thin film situation. Now, whatever be the case, whether it is spin coated with a PFO 1A composite or whether it is vacuum sublimated thermally evaporated layer, one would see whatever be the device configuration, you can see almost a similar feature is seen in the electroluminescence. This is the electroluminescence data. And one could see that the full width at half maxima is nearly 150 nanometers. As a result, in both cases you would see there is a white light emission coming out of these devices. So, conceptually we can make some logical conclusion or summary to say that benzthiazole molecules preferentially show white light emission, and the devices that we have made has this sort of energy level picture, which really falls well because your HOMO-LUMO level has to be compatible to ITO and to the cathode, and which exactly happens. Therefore, the holes are injected this way and electrons are injected this way, therefore, the combination exactly appears at this interface. And similarly, in the case of 2A compound, you can see that the holes can come easily and then electrons can go this way, therefore, the electron hole pair can actually have the fusion occurring here, and therefore, you can get the white light emission. So, as you are choosing a molecule, one should also know that the HOMO level and the LUMO level should be comparable to the adjacent layers, otherwise you would not get the right set of devices. And incidentally, in the case of 1A and 2A compound, we have an excellent match where the device falls in picture, and as a result we can harvest a white light emission. Now, as a passing thought, I would like to sort of give another small idea about what really happens if hydrogen bond exists in this sort of molecules. Take the case of same phenyl linker, but in this case not benzthiazole, we are actually having imidazole moieties. So, this is imidazole moiety. Now, this imidazole can actually have the NH groups facing outward or the NH group, one NH group facing inward. So, depending on that I can either talk about the possibility of a intermolecular hydrogen bonding, or I can talk about intramolecular hydrogen bonding. Both are possible. In such cases you can actually expect different sort of PL properties, and that is exactly what happens. There is a blue to green shifted fluorescence when you have a inter or a intramolecular hydrogen bonding, and I will show you as a quick representation how this happens. Now, if you take the synthesis part, as you synthesize this molecule, one would actually end up with DIB, that is dibenzimidazolyl benzene, and this compound we mark it B because it gives blue color. Now, if this blue colored compound, if you try to vacuum sublimate, what happens on vacuum sublimation, you get a compound which is actually showing green in color. So, this is a simple sublimation process, but during sublimation a blue color compound goes to a green color compound, which is of interest to us, and we can try to see what really happens. Now, you can take this blue colored compounds, which we call it as DIBB, and you can take this green color compound. If you look at the thermal analysis, you can clearly see the one which is having intermolecular hydrogen bonding suddenly collapses, and then the molecule undergoes a 100% weight loss, and this happens somewhere around 500 degrees C when you have intermolecular hydrogen bonding. Whereas, in the intramolecular hydrogen bonding, which is the case of the green emitting molecule, you can see that there is a sharp fall around 400, but then it extends down up to 1000 degree, which means the intramolecular hydrogen bonded compound is more thermally stable compared to intermolecular hydrogen bonded compound. And because of this hydrogen bonding network, the solid state property of these two compounds will vary. As a result, you would see what happens to the absorption spectra. The intramolecular hydrogen bonded one absorbs up to 450 or so, whereas the intermolecular hydrogen bonded shows a very sharp optical bandage, and that is narrow at 350 nanometers. And because of this reason, you would also see that the emission spectra is very clearly different. And what is the difference here? You can see here the blue emitting molecule is showing emission spectra somewhere around 380 nanometers, whereas in the case of green emitting molecule, the emission spectra is somewhere around 520 nanometers. And if you compare the solid and the solution spectra, emission spectra of the intermolecular hydrogen bonded molecule, you can see that there is a collapse of this intermolecular hydrogen bonding once you put it in solution. As a result, there is a red shifted emission in solution compared to blue emission in the solid state, whereas there is no such feature present in the case of intramolecular. The solvation does not seem to affect. So, this is a classic example to show that hydrogen bonding controls the PL emission. Even if it is a small molecule, you can have a precise fine tuning of color if you can hold the hydrogen bonding which will decide the PL emission. We have seen two case studies. In one case, I have shown you a spectrum of molecules, and I have tried to impress upon you how the sulfur based compounds lead preferentially to white light emission, and I have shown you some examples including devices as to why they show white light emission, and also I have shown you in the second case how hydrogen bonding can affect the PL property. In the third case that I want to present today before I close is the photo and electroluminescent properties of quinoline complex, and this is called as a solid solution clathrate. I want to share with you here the excitement, because all of us know that this is the most famous molecule called AlQ3 molecule, which has 3 quinoline units bonded to this. It forms an octahedral complex, and this AlQ3 molecule is one of the well known emissive layer in organic LEDs, because it is also used in today's display devices, including those display in digital cameras. Now, AlQ3 cannot just be the only molecule, we need to look for newer molecules for new properties. So, therefore, what will happen, suppose I take aluminum, indium, gallium, these are in the same group. Therefore, if I form AlQ3, indium Q3, gallium Q3, is it possible for me to make one complex having 3 metal ions in the same complex? And this is possible only if there are some number of molecules in a single unit cell. Then you can distribute atomically all these 3 atoms, and in that case you can get all 3 atoms in one molecule, which we call it as solid solution. And this is possible because there is one polymorph which is called as a clathrate. Clathrate is a caged structure, or it is a larger molecule with pi stackings, and I will show you some of the features of it. This is a typical crystal structure of a alpha isomer of AlQ3, and even in AlQ3 there are different polymorphs, and this is typically the X-ray crystal structure of a AlQ3 alpha isomer. And the AlQ3 can either be in meridional form or facial form. Meridional isomer has a structure, a core structure, which has 2 oxygens in close proximity against one away from these 2 oxygens, or these 3 oxygens can be equidistant. Okay. So, based on the way these oxygens are arranged, either you can categorize this as facial isomer or meridional isomer, but there is also one other phase which is called as clathrate, and this clathrate phase is a low temperature phase. If you try to heat this clathrate, actually if you sublimate, then you come across the alpha form, or these are all categorized as meridional forms, and there is another form called facial form. So, there can be interconversion from meridional to facial, or you can sublimate, or you can suspend it in acetone, and you can realize either alpha, gamma or delta form. And you also have this crucial polymorph which is called clathrate, which is actually made out of AlQ3 complex stacked with several of the solvent molecules. Therefore, this has a bigger crystal structure compared to the alpha isomers or the mer or facial isomer. So, we can actually try to look at the clathrate form and see if you can make all 3 atoms in a single molecule. So, if you look at the alpha form here, Z is equal to 2. So, suppose you have gallium Q3, you can see 2 gallium atoms sitting in this picture, and this is the situation for a clathrate. You can see there are 4 molecules of clathrate sitting in a cage structure, and this is by and large a bigger one. Therefore, there is a possibility if in a single unit cell it is possible to put aluminum, gallium and indium together in atomic level precision. And how can we diagnose that? If you take the X-ray diffraction peak, the alpha isomer typically looks like this, the delta isomer and the beta isomer, they all have a characteristic pattern, but essentially they all have only 3 quinoline moieties, but the way the solid state packing goes, they all differ from each other, therefore they are called as different polymorphs. But if you look at the clathrate, this is called methanol clathrate. The methanol clathrates have rather a very simple X-ray pattern which has a 100% peak somewhere around 10. Now if you have a 10 degree peak, then you can carefully try to look at AlQ3 clathrate, gallium Q3 clathrate, indium Q3 clathrate, and try to see whether they all have the same X-ray peak, and therefore we can try to look at what is the order of this solid solutions. I will show you the X-ray peak, the X-ray diffraction data of AlQ3, gallium Q3, indium Q3 and the solid solution. If you see here, all these peaks have a common 100% peak at 10 degree, which means principally they are all X-ray isomorphous, and because they are X-ray isomorphous, it is possible to have all the 3 atoms together in same molecule. Why we are looking at it? If you look at the aluminum Q3, this has more PL efficiency compared to indium Q3, because as you go down the series the PL efficiency goes down, whereas if you look at the mobility, as you go up the series the mobility decreases. In other words, mobility of the charge carrier is much better in indium Q3, whereas the PL efficiency is low, whereas in this case PL efficiency is much better in aluminum, whereas the charge mobility is comparatively less because of the ionic size and because of the electropositive character. So as a result, now we need to look at 2 things. One, PL efficiency goes down as you go down the group, and the ionic mobility of the charge carriers goes down as you go up the series. So you need a compromise. As a result, one can go for a solid solution which will have both PL and mobility values in a compromising ratio, and for this reason we can try to prepare these complexes. How do we prepare such complex? Individual complexes you can prepare by taking the nitrate, and this is hydroxyquinoline. So if you reflex this at a optimum condition, then you get aluminum Q3 or indium Q3 or gallium Q3. Now if you want to prepare a solid solution, what you do, you take this in stoichiometric proportion. If you reflex it, then you get this compound. As you see, although you take 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, in net you seem to get only this sort of compound as a solid solution, which means this is the most preferred stoichiometry at which the solid solution can be stable. So you can see the X-ray pattern is exactly matching with the individual compounds. How do we know that this is a solid solution? You can take the secondary electron image and the backscattered image. Secondary electron when backscattered image will give you clue whether it is a simple mixture of all the 3 complex together. Image you will see they are all in different colors. In black and grey resolution they will all be in different shades, but what you see here, from this picture to this picture, almost the color contrast is exactly the same. Therefore this is not a mixture of 3 complex, but this is a solid solution, and because it is a solid solution, the stoichiometry at this point is going to be the same at this point. The stoichiometry in any given place will be the same, and that is the simple definition of a solid solution precursor. Now we have tried to refine, we can try to refine this data. As you see here, AlQ3 and AAG, they show the similar X-ray pattern, and we can do the Rietveld analysis, and we can see that both are crystallizing in monoclinic form, and these are the structural data. But what is interesting that I would like to point out to you is the absorption spectra. You can see that the absorption spectra of the AlQ3, indium Q3, gallium Q3 and AIG, they all show similar feature, which means the pi to pi star transition and the n to pi star transition you can see is happening at around 260 nanometer and somewhere around 380 nanometer. This is due to n to pi star transition and this is due to pi to pi star transition, and it is all the same for both the solid solutions and individual molecules. But interesting point here is the emission data. If you see the emission data, we exactly have got what we anticipated, because AlQ3 and indium Q3, they have a very sharp change in the PL intensity. AlQ3 is highly luminescing compared to indium Q3, whereas if you prepare a solid solution which involves all three atoms together, then you can see that it is exactly placed in the middle. So, this is your AIG, which means I am able to now make a compromise between the mobility of charge carriers and the PL intensity by bringing all three metal ions together in a single compound, and this is possible only because it has a clathrate feature. Okay, so, by knowing the crystal structure, by knowing the X-ray pattern, it is possible to fine tune to get the right composition which will have dual property of both the mobility as well as the PL emission in one single form. And you can clearly see that if it is AlQ3, gallium or indium, they have preferred emission feature, and if it is DIG in solid, it exactly comes between these solids, indicating that these are really the solid solution, and the solid solution seems to be very typical of its structure, and therefore you do not see much of a change whether you record it in solid or in liquid form. And you can also try to fit this to a double exponential decay. You can see two components, tau 1 and tau 2, and mostly coming from the quinoline moieties, and these are all some of the data that we can agree upon and try to see how the solid solution is performing in comparison to the individual molecules. You can see that the absorption is placed somewhere closer to indium and gallium, and then the PL is exactly mid placed between aluminum and gallium complex, and so is all the homoluma values, everything is recorded, which clearly shows that such a solid solution can be achieved. Now, this is the electroluminescence data, EL spectra of a device which you can make with the ITO as your anode, then P dot PSS as the buffer layer, TPD as your whole transport layer, and this is the emissive layer, and then you have the electron transport layer, and this is the barrier, and this is your cathode. So, in a device configuration like this, you can see that AIG is giving a nearly good green emission, and one can see that the current and the light intensity curves are going hand in hand with the turn on voltage somewhere around 6 volts, fairly good one, and one can achieve a compromise between PL and mobility if one can actually play around with the amount of aluminum, indium and gallium that you can take in a single solid solution. And this is the EL spectra, which shows that this is nearly a greenish orange emission, that is coming out of this EL spectra. So, what do we see here? The clathrate architecture with Z is equal to 4 formula unit in a unit cell facilitates doping of different metal ions in a single unit cell. The essential feature that helps in realizing such a solid solution is the X-ray isomorphous nature. The EL device suggests that AIG can be used as a emissive layer in the device structure with a low turn on voltage. having said this, I just want to make some quick summary. In the first place, we looked at the specificity of these aromatic compounds, Benz heterosols, and I have shown you that 1A and 2A preferentially shows white light, the imidazoles show green, and the oxazoles show red emission, and a combination of thiazole and oxazole or thiazole and imidazole leads to either orange or to blue. So, with this notion, one can say that there is a very definite way, more like a thumb rule, one can try to exercise in rationally preparing the desired organic compounds that will give you a preferred emission. And of all the library of compounds studied, thiazoles in cis configuration show selective white light emission. Extended pi conjugated structures not only alter the band gap, but they give more thermal stability useful for device performance. And lastly, I have shown you an example where extra isomorphous clathrates can help us engineer solid solution clathrates to get a compromise between PL emission and mobility of the charge carriers. So, I stop here with this examples, and I will try to discuss in the next lecture how inorganic phosphors can be used for display technology.